Nylig arrangerte MIF sin årlige kongress ute på Fornebu, som endte i den flotte markeringen av Israels feiring av sin 78. uavhengighetsdag foran Stortinget. Vi har fått tilgang til deres materiale fra kongressen, og i dag så skal du få et innlegg som ble holdt av en forsker. Hun heter Anaella Meyer. Hun jobber ved et globalt anerkjent forskningsinstitutt som heter NGO Monitors. Det står for ikke-statlige-organisasjoner. Deres formål er å fremme demokratiske verdier og godt styresett. De utgir rapporter på disse organisasjonenes, disse ikke-statlige organisasjonenes sine finanser, og da spesielt når det gjelder den arabisk-israelske konflikten. Hennes innlegg kan være rystende for mange om faktisk hva våre penger går til. Men før vi setter på innlegget med Anaella Meyer, så skal du få en sterk oppfordring vi fikk fra Morste Giske under årets Jesuskvinner. For i forbindelse med den konferansen så spurte jeg Morste Giske, som tidligere har vært inne i programmet Fokus, for å fortelle om hva som skjer med de kristne i Iran etter at regimet stengte ned internett, og vi vet at i januar, 8. til 9. januar, så ble over 40-50 000 mennesker henrettet på gaten og overalt. Hun oppfordret oss til å be og til å våge å tale sant om hva som skjer i Iran. Og så vet vi at krigen har startet. Vi vet at Israel og USA gikk til krig mot det iranske regimet, og det har vært en våpenhvile, og under den våpenhvilen så stilte jeg et spørsmål til Morste Giske om hva som var viktig for oss troende nå. Hør på dette. Morste Giske, vi hørte i går fra deg hvordan du delte utviklingen av Jesuskvinner i Egypt. Fortell litt, hva skjer videre nå? Hva kan vi være med å be for at det skal utvikle seg i Midtøsten?
Ja, vi som vet Gud åpner en ny dør, eller en stor dør til Egypt, og fikk møte mange kvinner, og de var så sultne, og de vil ha det. Og når vi var delte i mai, vi hadde konferanse, det var så fantastisk, og det var begrenset bare 335, men det sprer seg i hele landet nesten, så fikk jeg og mannen min, vi var der igjen, det er bare å være og følge opp og besøke deg, og så høre deg som har vært allerede på konferanse, hvor det har skjedd noe med deg, og så fikk være med og besøke deg og dele, og som visjonen og dele, hvem er Jesus kvinne, ikke sant? Og du bare kjenner at det tender det noe brann i deg, og bare, jeg er Jesus kvinne, og de ville stå. Så jeg tror det er så viktig å være med og be for arbeidet, be for deg. Jeg får det melding også fra Teresa, som står bak denne arbeidet også der, som har kontakt daglig med deg på WhatsApp, og da bare spør deg hva som skjer, hva det blir, så det er deg i bønn også hva Gud vil gjøre videre i deres land. Men i hvert fall takk og lov, Gud har start noe i deg, og Gud ser deg og elsker deg. Så det er så nydelig å se hva Gud gjør det videre da.
Hvordan synes du det er å jobbe med Jesuskvinner i Midtøsten, nå da Egypt kontra her hjemme? Er det noe forskjell, eller er det den samme hungeren begge steder?
Ja, kanskje det er litt mer hunger der da. Og det noe sånn, kanskje de har vært litt undertrykt. Kvinnene i Midtøsten generelt, det ikke sånn, de litt undertrykt og sånn. Selvfølgelig det mest menn som og så få høre at Jesus bare løfter kvinnene, sier ikke du ikke under, eller du ved siden av mannen din, ikke sant? Og løfter deg, det så nydelig å se. Og da blir ikke de noe sånn, se på meg, da blir det på en måte, de finner sin plass i Guds plan, at Gud ser meg, jeg viktig i min familie, i min ekteskap, i samfunnet, det byen, landet.
Verdi,
ja. Det. Så det så nydelig å se, de ser denne potensialet som blir i deg.
Mor Giske, nå det, var det slutten av februar, krigen mot Iran startet, vil si mot det iranske regimet. Og du har jo vært med på Zoom tidligere. Vi har hatt flere norsk-iranere inne som har fortalt hvordan må regimet falle nå. Så dette her noe folket i Iran har ønsket velkommen. Så vet du nå, det våpenhvile, og det høres ut som om partene som gikk inn, i hvert fall fra USA sin side, at de føler at de har oppnådd målet sitt nå. Men hva sier folket i Iran til det?
Ja, du skjønner det som du sa, det her en krig som har pågått i over 47 år, det ikke noe nytt. Men det som vi ser det som Israel og USA har kommet inn, da vet vi også det for å hjelpe folket på en måte da. Men det har vært veldig mye som skjer det, som det sier det, og det sier det sånn og sånn hele tiden. Men jeg synes det personlig, vi må bare stole på Gud. Vår hjelp kommer fra ham. Vi kan ikke få forvente fra politikerne hva de synes å si det. Selvfølgelig, Gud kan bruke det. Vi skal be for lederne, politikerne, vi skal gjøre det. Men vi ser ikke opp til deg. Det ikke redningen kommer for deg, ikke sant? Og det så viktig, vi kristne, vi vet det. Det ikke bare politikere, det ikke bare politikken sånn, det åndelig også. Men vi tror også står det Guds ord om Iran, at Gud kommer å sette sin trone tilbake. Og det tror vi at det kommer å, midt i alt, Gud har kontroll, og det en trøst og en styrke å vite han med hele veien. Og det kommer å skje det som han har sagt. Spiller ingen råd, den leder sier, eller den leder sier det, det kommer å skje uansett. Og vi tror på. Det så viktig at vi være ikke som bare sånn, som en bølge som frem og tilbake, hva de synes det, Jeg snakket litt tidligere med en annen iransk kristen, som var veldig lei over litt sånn, hva som kommer å skje, og sånn hele tiden. Så det så viktig at vi ikke fokuserer på det, hva media sier det, hva andre. Fokuserer hva Guds ord sier, hva Gud sier til oss, og fortsette å bare be til ham. Fordi det bønn sterkeste våpen vi har. Og jeg tror det kommer å skje store ting. Og det allerede skjer det der. Og det en mørke Guds rik. Guds nåde stor også. Så vi tror på store mirakel som kommer å skje det. Freds første, det eneste som kan gi fred i Midtøsten, det Jesus Kristus. Og han allerede der. Så det kommer å bli det veldig, veldig bra.
So thank you so much for being here, and thank you, MIF, for having me present today. My name is Anaella Meyer, and I'm a researcher at NGO Monitor, which I will talk about in a little bit. And I must say that I'm extremely excited to be here today because this is my first time in Norway. And it's also quite a miracle when you come all the way from Israel, considering there was a war with Iran a few weeks ago, and I didn't know if I would have a flight, right? So Israel has been dealing with Iran for quite a while, but not quite as directly. Throughout the years, we've been at war with mostly Iran proxies, terrorist groups. And today we're going to focus on one terrorist group in particular, which is Hamas in Gaza. And Hamas has been in control of the Gaza Strip since 2007, when it was elected. And it has been really in control of everything there for its military and political gains. And one thing it has been in control of has been the international humanitarian aid sector. And this is what we're going to focus on today. But before I dive into this topic deeply, I have a couple of questions for everyone here. So if you could please raise your hand if you ever donated any money, any kroner at a human rights organization, ever, even if it's a little bit, one time. Wow, very impressive, okay. And now as a follow-up question, how many of you have researched the organization you gave money to? Meaning, have you looked at their website, what they're doing, social media? Perfect, perfect, I'm very happy to hear that. Now I have another question that is a bit more personal. You don't have to answer, but that would help me. I won't report you, but who here pays their tax money to their government? Okay, wow, Norway, amazing. So who here knows, as a follow-up question, who here knows what their government does with their money? Oh, I see here the answers are not quite as clear. And so I ask these questions because when we give money directly to organizations, we tend to know a little bit about them, right? We do a minimum research, we know where the money goes and to what purpose. But when we pay our taxes, a lot of the money the government gives to human rights organizations, to humanitarian aid organizations, but we as civilians don't really know who are those organizations, what are they doing, right? And for example, in Norway, in 2025, more than 1.1 billion Norwegian kroners were given to to organizations involved in the Israeli-Arab conflict. This is quite a big number, right? This is only 2025, and this is only Norway. So imagine when you have all the different countries together, it amounts to a humongous amount of money. And now, this is usually good, right? Human rights organizations are perceived as good organizations. Humanitarian aid organizations are needed. There are conflict zones everywhere. They are needed. But when it comes to conflict zones, in particular Gaza, where you have a terrorist group in control of the area, it is way more complex. And you would want your government to provide money to groups that are for sure trustworthy. And unfortunately, it does not always happen. And that is why we exist, NGO Monitor. Nice to meet you all. So I'm a researcher there. We are an institute, a research institute based in Jerusalem. We've been around since 2002, founded by our president, Professor Gerald Steinberg. And Gerald understood already back then that human rights organizations have this kind of protection, right? Because they're human rights organizations, people automatically think they are trustworthy, and there was no monitoring. And so we came along to monitor them, as the name says, NGO Monitor. You cannot be more clear than that. And we do fact-based research, meaning we look at the organization activities, we look at their staff, their funding, and we focus on Arab-Israeli on organizations active in the Arab-Israeli conflict. And we find a lot of different things, right? We find human rights organizations that are more political organizations. They focus on BDS, right? Boycott, sanction against Israeli products, Israeli companies. We have organizations doing lawfare, going to courts, right? Calling for an arms embargo against Israel, or going to courts to ask for an arrest warrant against Israeli soldiers or Israeli officials. The ICJ, right, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, NGOs are behind all of those cases. And in some cases, you even have organizations with link to terrorist group, which is what we're going to focus on today. So now we're going to watch a video that will introduce the topic.
A simple, devastating fact. Hamas funded and advanced their terror regime in Gaza by exploiting international aid.
This is not hyperbole. This is hard evidence recently discovered by the IDF and obtained by NGO Monitor that reveals exactly how humanitarian aid was transformed into a weapon of war.
NGO Monitor's findings uncover a list of guarantors, liaisons with Hamas working inside NGOs in positions of control, granting them veto power over humanitarian operations and enabling the regime to block, reshape, and exploit aid delivery. Senior officials were subjected to a comprehensive surveillance mechanism designed to intimidate and manipulate them into cooperating with the Hamas movement, allowing Hamas to bypass restrictions. More findings expose undeniable proof that hospitals, schools, and aid centers were systematically used to safeguard Hamas's military assets and personnel. Not only did Hamas hide out in these locations, but they abused the status of these neutral aid sites and the reputation of the NGOs to give global legitimacy to a narrative war that promoted anti-Semitism and hatred toward Israel in service of their physical war.
Many of these organizations knew exactly what was happening, and some were even complicit in it. No action was taken to prevent this, and the result was that this murderous terror group assumed full control of all aid.
NGO Monitor has been documenting this phenomenon for over 20 years, and now we are on the doorstep of a $70 billion reconstruction in Gaza. We must demand a different aid model.
We must come up with new standards of control, vetting, and oversight for international aid that embraces a simple thing: full exclusion of terror-linked NGOs.
Hamas's exploitation of humanitarian structures before October 7th was enabled by lax policies surrounding aid and funding. Now is the time for governments to act.
Okay, so this is quite a dramatic video, I must say, but it is a dramatic topic, right? And we're gonna go through this topic very deeply with examples straight from those Hamas documents, straight from Hamas' own words. So let's explain a little bit, in case you missed it in the video. We're talking about hundreds of documents that were retrieved from Gaza by the IDF, by the Israel Defense Force, declassified, and then we got access to them, some of them. And our researcher translated each one of those documents, tried to see if the information there was accurate, meaning they will look at names and dates and then look at the organization to match, to see that what Hamas was written was not something completely wrong. And we know that these are Hamas documents because they come from a ministry that is in Gaza, that is controlled by Hamas. The military wing of Hamas is the one taking charge of this ministry, which does surveillance mostly, counter-espionage. It makes sure that Sharia law, that Islamic law is applied. And we're talking about documents from 2018 till late 2022, so before the current war with Gaza, right? So it gives a good idea, those documents, of how Hamas really got into the humanitarian aid sector to plan really to give itself the power to then do attacks like October 7. So we're gonna go through each of those topics. I won't explain now. Okay. So the first things that Hamas did, was to have a guarantor system, an NGO liaison, right? So Hamas didn't choose that person, but it had to approve that person. That would be someone that holds a senior position in the NGO, and that would be Hamas affiliated or at least compliant to Hamas inside each international organization in Gaza, right? So we have someone that is compliant, that is affiliated to Hamas in each organization. And they have to be a local liaison, they have to be subject to surveillance, to pressure, they have to give Hamas information about project, about finances, right? So this is a guarantor, and let's look at an example of a guarantor. Does everyone here know the Norwegian Refugee Council? No? Okay. So this is a humanitarian aid organization that is famous worldwide. It is Norwegian-based, and it's going to come up a lot during that presentation. So here we're going to call it NRC to be quicker. So NRC guarantor, for example, is described as supporting the Hamas movement, but not affiliated with the movement, and is employed by the government of Gaza and has the rank of Naqib, which is Hamas rank for captain, right? So this is NRC's guarantor. And in total, in all the documents we've found, there's around 10 guarantors that have Hamas linked, that have worked on the Hamas ministries in Gaza. This is quite a large number. And now, obviously, when we did a whole report based on those documents, and NRC had some things to say about it, and one of the claims regarding the guarantors was that they are only responsible for uploading and submitting applications for travel permits, and that it is an administrative requirement, right? So this is what NRC is saying the guarantor is. Now let's look at what Hamas is saying. Hamas says in their document that the guarantors can be exploited for security purposes in order to infiltrate foreign association, their foreign senior personnel, and their movement. So it's not quite travel permits, it's not quite administrative requirement. We're talking here about people inside the international organization that can be exploited by Hamas. And indeed, they are being monitored by Hamas. In their documents, they list each of the guarantors with, as you can see in the document, some bullet points about each one of them. And this is some example from the documents about what Hamas really cared about. For example, one guarantor left her house in exposed clothing that transgressed Sharia law. Another one is morally corrupt. Another one hates Hamas movement, which is a problem for Hamas, right? And very complicated for Hamas, apparently someone is a communist. Like, what are they going to do about that? So these are things that we have taken quotes straight from Hamas regarding the guarantors. And now not only do they monitor and see what are their affiliation politically, what are those guarantors doing, but they also have a lot of power in the organization into making them do what they want. So in the 2016 annual report of PCHR, which is a Palestinian organization, they're all linked, they say that restriction imposed on civil society in the Gaza Strip by the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Interior coerces NGOs to abstain from activities that could bother the authorities, adding that international organizations were targeted and put under pressure by the ministry, which has almost absolute power over the organizations. So this organization that is working in Gaza says that the ministry, which is a Hamas-controlled ministry, has almost absolute power over international organization. Okay, let's see. So here we have a document from 2020 about International Medical Corps, which is another organization that works in Gaza. And it says that the organization was closed for a week because they didn't want to give financial information to Hamas, right? And also they added that the director of the association is Jewish, important fact for Hamas as well. And another example is an NRC employee who apparently had embarrassing photos of her on her phone, and they just took her phone away, right? That's how much Hamas could have, how much power they had on the organizations and the staff. Another example is what we're going to call the 2016 NRC incident, which is when Hamas invaded the Norwegian Refugee Council office in Gaza. And two Palestinian organizations, have written about this a little bit. We have Al-Mazan, who says in 2016 that the ministry representative asks the NRC employees to hand over the keys of the office and leave everything in the offices behind, right? And PCHR, another organization, says that the international organization were subjected to harassment by the Ministry of Interior, which is a Hamas ministry, and they usually resort to friendly solution by offering concessions, right? So this is what PCHR has said about this incident in 2016. And funnily enough, NRC has said nothing, at least not in 2016. They never reported this incident, which you would think an international organization would say, oh, we had an issue, Hamas invaded our offices. They never did. And so after our report was published, the report did not mention this incident, but after our report was published, NRC tried clearing its name, and they said that they have thoroughly reviewed the allegation and believe there is nothing in the report that indicate that their control system have been compromised, right? Well, we know that in 2016, they were invaded. And then a week later, NRC came out with a statement where suddenly they mentioned the incident, right? So again, we have those international organizations that obviously have a problematic relationship with Hamas, right? Hamas can control them, they can take the keys of their office, they can close the offices, but those organizations are not revealing that. They're not saying what happened, and that is an issue. Another way that Hamas has been taking over the humanitarian aid system is via a beneficiary list. What it means is that there are programs in terms of humanitarian aid that provides a cash voucher to families in need, right? If a family has really struggling because of the war, they would receive cash. And the organization providing this cash are getting the list of beneficiaries from Hamas-controlled ministries, okay? So as you can imagine, we're talking about a terrorist group. What would they want inside those lists? Hamas people, or at least Hamas-affiliated people. So let's look at an example. This is a document on a program from NRC, Handicap International, and Mercy Corps, a joint program. And you see there's this table with bullet points where it explains each beneficiary's what are his affiliation, right? So these are what we found in that one document. One beneficiary was formerly affiliated with the Army of Islam, a US designated terrorist organization. Another one receives salary from the MOST, which is the ministry controlled by Hamas, and has good relations with Hamas people, right? Those people are getting the aid. Another one was formerly a member of the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigades, which is a military wing of Hamas. Another one worked in the Positive tunnels for 3 years, Positives being Hamas. The tunnels, as we all know, were used by Hamas to hide weapons, to hide hostages, okay? And the last one is affiliated with another terrorist group. And so instead of the civilian getting the money, these are the people getting the money, okay? So far we've seen that Hamas has a lot of control. It is monitoring all of those organizations. And unfortunately, a lot of time we see that none of it was reported, right? Until we read those documents and we came out with a report, no one knew about this. And why is it? Why is it that the international organization did not mention any of these incidents? Let's look at more example, right, of this silence and even sometimes complicity. So this is, again, Norwegian Refugee Council. In 2022, in a March 2022 document, Hamas explains gives a story of a delegation from NRC that came to Gaza to see the house of an elderly couple, right? A very poor elderly couple that had health issue, and that their house was basically destroyed, the wall crumbling, and the floor collapsed completely, okay? And that elderly man goes to NRC people, right, to the delegation, and asks whether the reason the floor in his house was collapsed was that there was a tunnel, okay? Now, what would you, as NRC, would maybe say? What would you try to do? I don't know. You would try to ask questions to understand, is it really a tunnel? Report it even. Try to help that poor guy, right? Let's see what they actually did. According to Hamas, again, Hamas' own words, neither the foreign delegation nor the association's employee asked whether there was a tunnel under the civilians' apartment, which caused the floor to collapse. Rather, it was the apartment owner who asked the researcher. Nevertheless, the researchers did not reply to him. Okay? International organization that is receiving Norwegian money, and a lot more money than you would think. They did not respond. Okay? And now we're getting to the last example, which I personally really like. In October 2022, we have another Norwegian Refugee Council delegation to Gaza. Jan Egeland, I hope I pronounce it right, the head of NRC, went into Gaza, and they released a statement explaining the trip, right? And one thing that was said is that Egeland met with mothers in Gaza. No issue with that. He can meet with as many mothers as needed, right? But then let's look at what Hamas says about this delegation, right? And it's all, as you can see, the document is from October 31st, 2022, and the delegation came in October 2022. They say, and I quote, "The head of the delegation visited the headquarters of the Ministry of Social Development." Again, this is a Hamas-controlled ministry. At the time of his arrival at the office of Dr. Ghazi Hamad, Mar Imad Khalaf, the director of public relations of the ministry, was present in welcoming him. So for those who don't know, Ghazi Hamad is a senior leader of Hamas, okay? Since October 7, he has been interviewed several times, really supporting the October 7 massacre. He is Hamas, you can Google him. And Imad Khalaf, I mean, he is part of the ministry is Hamas, so same. And as you can see, maybe he met mothers, but he also met Hamas officials, but that was not, right, never mentioned. So this was really just a little bit of the examples we have in our reports, right? I would advise you to go into our website, ngomonitor.org, and see all the things we have found, which include several different organizations. Now I focus more on Norwegian Refugee Council because I think most of the examples are very interesting. But there are plenty of organizations that have guarantors that have been really cooperating even with Hamas in some cases. So I would welcome you to look at that. And our recommendation, right, as reconstruction of Gaza is on its way, and we're talking again about billions of euros for the reconstruction, there should be better vetting, there should be a new mechanism in the way in which the governments are providing money to aid organizations. They need to make sure that there's transparency to know where that money is going so that it helps the civilians and not the terrorist groups, okay? So that's what I would personally ask. And for all of you also to be aware of this phenomenon and to make your governments be accountable. Because if you want to help in Gaza, that is not the correct way. So that's it for me. Thank you. Oh.
I think we have to share this one. Okay. Thank you so much. It's quite scaring. Yeah. And now we have the questions. How did yourself and your family experience the 7th of October?
Okay, thank you. So, as every Israeli, I think October 7 was terrifying. It was many days of not going out of the house, right? And I know my family, they were terrified. They didn't know what to do. No one knew what was happening, really. For the longest time, you would watch the news, but even the news didn't know what was happening. And that is scary. For me personally, I wasn't in Israel when it happened. I was working at the permanent mission of Israel to the UN. So the way I experienced October 7 was quite different. It was inside the United Nations in New York, which is, I won't say just as bad, but it is also pretty close. The people there were not quite friendly. We had some support the first few days, and then obviously everything crumbled. So that's how we experienced it.
And the next one. What role has NGO Monitor played in the new directive from Israel when they now demand the list of the staff and foundation to the aid organization in Gaza?
So as some of you may know, there's this new visa registration process when it comes to organization working in Gaza. And it is new. Before that, any organization could apply to get the visa and work in Gaza. But obviously with the war and with what happened and with what you see in those documents, there was a need for better vetting. There's a need for transparency. I think people, the organization working in Gaza, humanitarian aid organization, need to be held accountable. They need to provide enough information so that none of what we talked about today would happen. So as an NGO Monitor, we advise any government, not only the Israeli government, but any government regarding vetting, how to make sure that the organizations that are getting funding or that are working in Gaza are trustworthy. So, yeah, I think it's much needed.
And the next one, what are your thoughts on Israeli founding of Hamas and the approval and the encouragement of Qatar founding Hamas?
Ooh, what a big question. I mean, I'm not Israel's spokesperson at all. I represent my organization, which again focuses on NGOs. I think, again, I would not advise any funding to Hamas. Those are not good people. They don't want us to be happy in Israel. So on a personal part, I will not want any money getting into their hands in any way.
One more.
Yes.
Your talk was especially about the Norwegian NCR. Do you find similarities with the other countries and or the EU?
Yes, so what I talked about was mostly based on this report that I wrote, which is based on the main report, which is focused on Norwegian-funded organizations that are mentioned in the documents. But we have the same version of this report for the EU, for the US, for the Netherlands, for Sweden, right? We have a few different reports that focus on all the organizations those countries are funding. So this one I thought was more relevant for you guys since we're in Norway, but obviously, and that's why I said you should look into our website because there's plenty more information on different organizations. Unfortunately, I wish it was only NRC, right? But yeah.
Does any aid from Norway reach the civilians?
That is a great question. I'm sure, of course, we're talking about billions, right? I'm sure some of it gets to civilian. When I showed the beneficiary list, right, only a few sentences were about Hamas people. Some of them are actual civilians. So I do hope that some of them are getting help. But again, they should get the help, but they could get better help. if it didn't get to terrorists at all, right? So that will be should be the focus. Continue giving help and aid, but make sure that it goes to trustworthy organizations that are actually going to do that.
Yes. I've heard that Hamas has paid compensation for 50,000 killed soldiers. Is that right?
That Hamas has paid compensation? Yes. I heard that there was the Palestinian Authority that paid compensation for killing Israelis, and they're getting most likely sanctions from the US. I'm not so sure, so don't quote me on that. Regarding Hamas, I mean, who would that surprise, right? A terrorist group is a terrorist group, and they are proud whenever they kill Israelis or kill Jews. It's something they celebrate. They even give cookies, right, in the street of Gaza whenever it happens. So they might as well pay the terrorists as well.
You mentioned NRC. What about the Médecins Sans Frontières? Are they cooperating with Hamas as well?
So Médecins Sans Frontières, I'm French, so here you go, is also an organization that is mentioned in the documents. And we have soon enough a big report coming out on MSF specifically, because there is quite a lot of information, unfortunately. And part of our reports, I'll go back into the slide, we also have a whole report that talks about Hamas being embedded, right, in the hospitals in Gaza. Now we talked about the humanitarian aid, but there's also a whole part in the Hamas document about hospitals and how they also use the international organization inside the hospitals. So obviously we don't have that much time for me to go into it, but I'll be happy to show you the report and for you to get to know that side also of the story.
What was the reaction from NRC and the Norwegian government to your report?
Okay. So NRC, I talked about it a little bit. As you can see, I used some of the quotes. Most of the organization were denying what we said. Even a few days after our reports came out, they came out with statements denying everything, which is funny because you would think they would, double check, they would read, No. For some of them, it took a couple days, a week maybe, and they denied everything, saying that they're neutral, that there was no access to their organization, as we saw with as I told you earlier, with the incident of Hamas invading NRC's offices. They didn't say anything until a report came out. So again, there's this thing happening of international organizations just not reporting these issues, right? So.
Yes. Does Norway state contribution to Gaza help enable and struggle against Israel for Hamas?
I didn't understand, sorry.
Does Norway
state contribution to Gaza help enable? Yes.
You think so? Mm.
Again, a lot of the money that governments are providing is being diverted, right? And not only the money, but also the food, the medicine. A lot of it is being diverted to Hamas. And yes, that's one way in which Hamas got the power to do the October 7 attack, right? That's how they got the money. That's how they could get themselves some armaments, some weapons, how they could build the tunnel, right? So yes, unfortunately, a lot of government-funded programs were, in the end, given this money, this aid was given to Hamas, even if it's not directly. It happened.
And so the last one, how trustworthy would you say Amnesty International is?
Ooh. Amnesty International, unfortunately, is not as trustworthy as it used to be. I think it started as a normal human rights organization, but with the year it became very politicized. It loves all those blood libels against Israel, the genocide, starvation, apartheid, those are their favorite words, right? Every post, somehow, it's an apartheid state, it's a genocide. And for us as Israelis and in NGO Monitor, it's hard to take the organization seriously, because a lot of their reports, a lot of the posts they give are not based on truth, which is unfortunate, because again, this is an organization that has had a good name for several years and is seen as a good organization by many. But when you start going deeper into their activities, you understand that they're not quite a pro-human rights organization as they claim to be.
Yeah, I don't think we will be finished today. I want you to have some thought about the Peace Research Institute Oslo and Equal Institute, which are against Israel.
Okay. I am not familiar with those institutes, but what should
The Peace Research Institute Oslo
Mm-hmm.
and Equal Institute.
Okay, so maybe I need to do some research then. Yeah, thank you. I'll add it to my list. Thank you. By the way, I would add, if you ever have an organization that you're aware of that is problematic, that you see in your street, in campuses, and you think we should do research on them, please contact me. I can provide you with my card. As I'm in Israel, so sometimes I don't, as easily as you can be aware of those groups being active in Norway, right? So if you have anything, any information, any institute that you think I should research, then please.
What do you think the doctors and the nurses from foreign countries knew about Hamas on the hospital they worked at?
The doctors?
And the nursing and all the personnel.
The doctor, which doctors?
It's in Norwegian. From the Kolleger uten grenser in English.
Doctors Without Borders.
Doctor without MSF, yes. If they knew, I'm sure. I don't want to say for sure, right? We cannot know for sure. But most likely, when you work in Gaza in general, you have at some point a contact with Hamas people. They're there, they're everywhere, and they were inside the hospital where those groups, where those organizations were working. So if every doctor of MSF knew, I hope at least they're aware that Hamas was in the area, right? But I cannot say for sure on this.
And how are you reaching out to NGOs, international governments, to the EU?
You reach out to NGOs, international governments? NGOs, international governments? I'm not sure I understood that question.
There's supposed to be NGO and international governments and EU.
Where, in Gaza?
How is NGO Monitor reaching out to European governments?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So we have contacts because we've been working again since 2002. So we got contacts in different governments around Europe, in the US, in Canada, and we try to provide them with our reports, right? As any organization does, they usually try to reach the people in power so that something could be done. We had quite a lot of successes throughout the years with certain resolution against extremist groups, right? Or the cut in funding of certain organizations, because some governments, thankfully, are listening. They are looking at our reports and they see a problem and they will do their own investigation and sometimes change their policies. And one thing also that should be said is that a lot of our reports are based on open source information, meaning these are all social media posts, they are their own statement, annual reports. It's not something we invented. This one is about Hamas documents, so it's either you trust the Hamas document or you don't. But most of our reports on our website, you can click on the link and get straight to the point. So there's not much a government can say when they look at our reports, because if they don't believe it, we're like, okay, just click and look, you have it. you have the picture of this person with a terrorist, right? And thanks to that, many governments are willing to listen to us and sometimes do good changes.
One more. Why did Amnesty close the Amnesty International office in Jerusalem?
So I'm not so sure what happened exactly. I know that there was some Jewish staff that were complaining a little bit there regarding how the organization was covering the conflict, but I'm not so sure.